Good evening, Matt.
Hey Graham, great to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome, everyone, to Crazy in Love, the podcast where two therapists talk about all things to do with relationships. Tonight, Matt, we're going to explore an unusual reason why a lot of relationships fail. Maybe in a few words, it's quite a simple reason why some relationships fail. But it might be a surprise to some of our listeners and some of our viewers as to why this is a major source of relationships not working. It can be summarized in a few words, can't it? Which is the title of a blog post that we recently did for Psychology Today called Don't Be a Jerk. But of course, it's a little bit more complex than that. Kick us off by explaining a little bit more about what's underneath that simple phrase of don't be a jerk in a relationship.
Yeah, so I think people are looking around for much more complex explanations than this one. So I think instinctively it doesn't necessarily feel that satisfying. People wonder whether it's about attachment styles or they wonder whether it's about love languages, if you kind of buy that sort of thing. But actually, the best predictor of whether your relationship will survive is not how often you have sex or even how well you communicate. It's really like whether or not you are contemptuous of your partner. And that's really what a thing that sort of stands in for like, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk is a bit American facing, isn't it? Which is
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of the Psychology Today and a large part of the audience there. But like, don't be contemptuous of one another would be the other way of phrasing it. And we should probably unpack
We
um,
should. We should
what
unpack what that is and what it looks like, and then maybe explore why contempt is such a relationship killer, like compared to how often you have sex or your attachment style or whatever it might be. Like the evidence does suggest that contempt is a big driver of relationship dissatisfaction. I think we need to understand why that might be as well.
Yeah, so that's where it comes from. So the Gottmans do some research on this. So the Gottmans are like a big name in sort of understanding relationships, and John Gottman in particular studies thousands of couples to look at what sort of thing is impacting relationships positively and negatively. And it turns out, I think, sort of against really what their expectation would have been, but that the contempt is the thing that predicts divorce. So things like eye rolling, right? Things like sarcastic digs, things like talking down to your partner, things like talking about your ex or comparing them unfavorably to your
Mm.
ex, maybe more specifically, those sorts of things. So it's not quite criticism, it's more than that. So criticism's not a great thing either, but it's a step on from that. It feels more like disdain or
Yeah, and some of
yeah,
those behaviors that you list, it's almost like it's the mindset underlying some of those behaviors that you've got into a bit of a trench of just being annoyed or irritated or dismissive of the things that your partner is doing. So things that other people would just see as very normal, you've become kind of eye rolly or sarcastic or annoyed by. And
yeah.
it's that tone that infects the relationship more
Yeah,
generally.
yeah, it's a good way of putting it. It's exasperation, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the tone is often what I'm noticing when I'm in the therapy room with couples. They're talking, they're making a request to one another, they're commenting on what the other person has said, but it's kind of dripping with contempt. It's sarcastic or it's mocking or kind of they're imitating their speech pattern or something like that, which is just it's a million miles from what you do with a friend. It's a million miles from what you do professionally. I often invite people to wonder whether they would speak that way to their boss, for example, or to their key client. And it's sort of whatever you would do in that environment. If you were wanting to be, polite and land a message there, or deal with a sticking point professionally, you wouldn't go anywhere near contempt. But often in a relationship, that's exactly what couples do. They speak to one another in that way, and they arrive in therapy sometimes listing out a whole load of complaints about their partner rather than thinking about what they could change or what they could do.
gives Sometimes gives the partner who is a bit contemptuous a bit of plausible deniability, doesn't it? That they can say, "Oh well, I wasn't meaning that, or I don't intend to make them feel that way." I sometimes see in couples work that contempt contemptuousness can be denied, can be pushed back on their partner, and it can be quite difficult to get underneath the mindset, the tone, and really explore kind of why are you feeling that way? Do you even notice that you're acting in that way? I
Yeah.
don't know if you see that at all.
No, I think it's a good observation. I think I know exactly what you're describing there. And with couples, like that would be my challenge. Can you end that statement with in brackets, you absolute idiot, you know? Or something like that. Does it actually follow on? Is that really the intent of what you're saying? And it almost certainly wouldn't fly in other circumstances with when you're on your best behavior, so to speak, at work, maybe with extended family members, maybe professionally. You wouldn't dream of speaking to somebody in that fashion. Even in a service encounter, you probably wouldn't do that. But couples speak to one another in a way that I don't know, sometimes just defies those conventions. And I think when it goes all the way beyond criticism or irritation and drops into disdain and contempt, you are behaving a bit like a jerk. And that is, it's going to be really problematic, a really difficult thing to come back from. So best avoided, right? Best done very, very occasionally, if at all. And it needs some action. What the Gottmans were expecting to find was, cheating. That would be the thing that ended relationships. And I think this is, to your point, the bit of plausible deniability. Well, it wouldn't be this. It wouldn't just be the manner in which I speak. It must be something concrete. It must be because we've grown apart, or it must be because of poor communication more generally. It can't be, it can't be something as simple as this.
Yeah, and I imagine that part of the reason why contempt drives relationship failure and divorce so frequently is that it's a two-sided thing, right? It's horrible to, I imagine, and let's maybe explore this for a little bit. It's horrible to feel contempt for a partner, but it's obviously equally, if not more, horrible to be on the receiving end of that contempt. So I imagine a lot of partners who are on the receiving end are the ones that quit, ones that get out. They've just had enough of being seen through that lens.
Yeah. My experience would be that it's not particularly one way. It's not something that one person does to another while the other person noble and, long suffering and whatever else. It feels more like it marks the relationship, and it leads to all of those sorts of things that then I think people associate with split or breakups or divorce. So sexual dissatisfaction, because why would you want to sex and be intimate with somebody who was contemptuous of you, of whom you were contemptuous? It wouldn't, it wouldn't make any sense. It's sort of leading you in that direction, but it does feel like a back and forth when I see it. And sometimes it's more aggressive, and other times it's a bit more passive and hidden. And that isn't really the marker whether somebody is coming at you with heat or whether somebody is doing it in a more sly way or a kind of sulky way or whatever else. The contempt is the contempt, right? The contempt could be you're just never around. You're not, you're not carrying your load in the home, and you couldn't give a damn about it, and you think your work is more important than the other person. That would be another sort of practical outworking, I guess, of that contemptuous attitude that doesn't honor what one person does and respect that it's different in whatever ways, but is dismissive of it, disparages it, completely diminishes, disdains it.
Some people would, I imagine, say that contempt is a sign that two people have almost run their course. It's a sign that two personalities don't mesh very well.
Yeah.
That it is a kind of red flag for the beginning of the end or the end of a relationship. So why would you, rather than see it as a signal of something that you should get out of, why would someone like us as a couples therapist kind of lean in and say, actually, this is, if you can shift that mindset a bit or shift your behaviors a bit, this is actually potentially a relationship worth saving?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's an open question for me. I think if either party are not interested in doing that and shifting, it probably is the beginning of the end, isn't it? I think sometimes we do fall into really bad habits and ways of speaking. I think there is a bit of a cultural assumption that you get to be your worst self with your partner, and you should be able to accept me at my worst, and I should be able to say what I want or say what I'm feeling. And that's the thing that I guess I'm pushing back on. I'm sure you are too.
I am.
That is not the way that this is going to succeed. If you often or occasionally behaved yourself this way at work, you would soon be dismissed, put on a performance improvement plan, not given priority projects, whatever else it is, you find yourself without work. It's like, it's not going to work. It doesn't do you any good either. If you want to ask for something, you have to find a constructive way of asking for it. And if you want out of the relationship, you're still far better off doing that with respect and decency. Very often there are, financial things in common that need to be uncoupled. Often there are children involved. So, I mean, there is no alternative. If you're in that kind of situation, you're going to have ongoing business with one another as a couple in some way, shape, or form over the next however long, chances are. So I would get out of the contempt habit and get into what can you find to respect and like about this person who, at first at least, you found desirable and funny and
Yeah.
charming and all
Yeah.
of that stuff.
But would you agree, though, stepping back a bit, I agree with all of what you've said, but I'm imagining some of my relationships that didn't work out for one reason or another. And contempt was a part of the
Uh-huh.
long breakup process. And it was a signal of, oh, okay, maybe I'm not meant to be with this person, or maybe this
Yeah.
person doesn't want to be with me. That it is a kind of way that I think that human beings signal to one another that they're not meant to be together. So certainly in the earlier stages of life, potentially, if you are feeling contempt towards a partner, it might well be a signal of we're not meant to be together, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, yeah. I think that's our vulnerability, isn't it? The couples therapists want to keep a couple together and want to go
Yeah,
after success. Often I meet people and I like them both individually. I have to quite like what's going on between them as a couple at certain points, or you can see some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think you've got to be careful about, I don't see it as my job to save the relationship. I think if the couple
agreed.
work on it, then I'm full tilt behind that. And I think it's often a preferential outcome for them, but that's their choice, and I don't feel like I have, skin in the game. I talk to lots of couples about how they'll separate as well. And some couples are genuinely come in, I think, ambivalent or open-minded about what the future holds for them. And I think, couples therapy oddly can be very satisfying to do in the circumstances where the couple separate, but they separate with a bit of dignity and kindness towards one another, drawing some lessons from that, and not bruising one another and battering one
Yeah,
another.
that's interesting. So even kind of what you're saying there is that contempt, even if contempt does lead to, or is a signal of something not being great about a connection between two people, that they're likely to walk away from that relationship if they can drop the contempt and drop being the kind of jerky behavior that we're talking about. They're likely to feel better about themselves and likely in their later years to look back a bit more fondly on that relationship that didn't work out.
Yeah, and I think those things matter very
Yeah,
much, don't
I
they?
agree.
I think in terms of your sort of whole life happiness and your satisfaction, your sense of fulfillment, your ability to look yourself in the mirror and think whether whether you've played your hand reasonably or not. I don't think you look back on those things and, feel anything other than a bit of pity or shame or, uh, whatever else about it, a negative feeling, really. Also, something very practical about what you're going to take into your next relationship. I say to couples who, I say to individuals who are not yet in a couple and who are dating and meeting new people, like what your prospective partner or date says about their ex or string of exes is often very illustrative of what, is what going on inside for them. If all of them were absolute arseholes, unpardonably, this, that, and the other, well, there might be a common denominator, mightn't they? But if they're generous about some of their exes and they highlight that one or two really weren't good fits at all, and perhaps they didn't behave well, that's probably a pretty balanced take on the world, isn't it? So a long way off universal contempt for everybody would be sort of what I would be looking for there. If somebody can speak
Yeah.
openly and kindly about somebody that they shared a life with for a long while, that's a very good sign. It doesn't mean they're hung up on their ex. It means like they're a reasonable person.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just taking a slight backward step to what I was saying about contempt. So I think most of the couples that we work with in couples therapy have spent a significant period of time where they have really enjoyed each other, where their
Right.
personalities have
Yeah.
together really well. They've wanted similar things out of life. They've really been excited by each other and enjoyed each other's company, and somehow have
Yeah.
drifted into that place where they're a
Yeah.
little bit mean to each other. And I think there is some real value in trying to reconnect with some of those elements of the relationship that they've drifted apart from.
Yeah, I agree. I was just
Bring
thinking
them
of
on.
really kind of sort of basic examples around, I don't know, tidiness or cleanliness, where
Yeah.
sometimes someone not not doing what you want of them, coming and sitting on the sofa and cuddling and doing the dishes later, or alternatively the other way around, getting the dishes done so it's done and the kitchen is clean because you really value that, and then you can relax. Someone not doing that, someone not honoring your preference, can end up seeming like they don't give a damn about me, and it can have like a great deal of emotion attached to a thing which doesn't necessarily need it to be. If we get the communication out there, this really matters to me because it would really help if, and then we could trade on that, understand one another's point of view, take turns or whatever the solution would look like. But when we go in at it like kind of button heads, it feels like that's where the contempt can start. But it comes from something quite practical, or it's sort of, you see it through something quite practical, but behind it is just a very different opinion of timekeeping, or standards of how you keep the house, or who does what. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
I see that. I was thinking as you were talking about another element of what you particularly kind of push for in some of our conversations, which is a bit of mystery, a little bit of independence, a little bit of don't show everything. So that I think some contempt in relationship can come from almost kind of relaxing your standards a bit too much with
Mm,
each other, relaxing your standards of some of the
yeah.
stuff we talk about in terms of keeping the toilet door open when you're doing your business, and
Yeah.
whether that actually is beneficial to a relationship, or whether you want to keep some sort of mystery and some things just away from each other. And I think some of the stuff that we talk about, and maybe the Gottmans talk about in terms of contempt, probably does come from, oh God, I'm kind of living with someone that just doesn't really care much
Yeah.
about showing me
Yeah.
only the good stuff. They've almost let me see too much of the stuff that I don't want to see about them.
No, I think that's good. I'd agree. I think uh, often with couples, I'm contrasting how they were at first, how they
Yeah,
behaved first, and then what feelings they had, with how they behave now and what feelings they have towards each other. And at first, you turn up on time, you look good, you've taken a shower, you've thought about what you're wearing, you've probably thought about the venue, and you're bringing like interesting conversation. You're probably not turning up late, in need of some freshening up and moaning about work incessantly. Those things are not that attractive in themselves. And I think again and again and again, it's like, this is a contemptuous use of my time, or this is like, I'm just a sounding board for you to moan about a thing that you
exactly. Like
enjoy.
you wouldn't talk like this to people at work. You'd put on a good front. You'd kind of try and talk.
Yeah, and you wouldn't do it when you were dating. You wouldn't do it in those first, like,
Yeah,
that's not what you fell
yeah.
in love with. What I really like about this person is they moan all the time. What I really like about this person is they've never got any energy. What I really like about this person is they always want to go to bed because they're worn out from the day. Like, those things are, they might be true in certain circumstances, but if they're
Well, they've
thoroughly
got to be
through
true.
the
They've got to be
relationship,
allowable and true in certain circumstances,
yeah,
right? But I think what we're talking about is those relationships where the relationship becomes the place where you moan. The relationship becomes the place where
yeah,
you
yeah.
scroll on your phone and you moan about.
Yeah. Yeah. And those standards of personal hygiene, and
Yeah,
what people do in front of one another. So that you wouldn't be so free with that in the early months of a relationship, and there is a reason for it, and it's probably unwise, to do the kind of things you were describing earlier. I think it's also just letting go of really simple things. So in the article, we say, like, what's the opposite of being a jerk? And it's something like it means listening, doesn't it? Actually listening, phone down and listening, and it means saying sorry when you've screwed up, or when you haven't been listening to something. It means saying thank you for small things. It means doing small things. You're making yourself a drink. You're also thinking about whether the other person wants one. And those things will sound really silly, but they go out the window. And when I
yeah,
talk to couples, those things often connect, that like,
yeah,
oh, he always used to do that for me and now he doesn't, or
yeah.
she always used to, she cooked more, or he did this for me
Yeah,
more, or he was always much more thoughtful on
I
birthdays, or
agree.
kinder and sweeter around my friends and family, and now he can't be bothered, and
I think it's an accumulation of relatively small things. I say this a lot in our conversations, that I don't think in most relationships people want or need a lot. They need small things most days.
I agree.
Sense of, I'm running 5 minutes late. I'm going to let them know because I'd let a friend know. So I'm going to let my partner know that I'm running 5 minutes late. It's that
Yeah.
simple.
Absolutely, yeah, and you can do all that when you're tired as well. So I mean, I would give you your point of 2 minutes ago where you said you've got to be allowed to do those things sometimes. But I mean, have you ever been to work tired? Have you ever taken a meeting where you're not really sure how you're going to get through it, but you
Yeah, but
still
you also
manage
want
to
to
do
work in
that?
a workplace where occasionally you can say, God, I'm knackered. I had a
Yeah,
team.
absolutely. Yeah.
No one wants to go into it in too much detail, do they? They don't want to know too much
No,
about.
no, 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 absolutely. But it also doesn't mean that there would be free reign to be contemptuous, right? So
Sure.
you might observe that, but you might be there. Therefore, I'm still going to take the meeting, and I've still got two more emails to send before I can go home, rather than I can't possibly do this, which I think is the attitude that I sometimes see in relationships when they're at their worst. I can't possibly put myself out for you because because I'm tired, because I've had a long
Yeah.
day, because it's been a heck of a week, because the kids are driving me nuts, because the place is a mess, because we haven't got food in or whatever else. It's like, okay, well, it needs fixing. No, it needs like, and maybe we need a plan of how to avoid that in future. But it isn't licensed for anything, and I often get met with those things as an excuse. I was exhausted, or I just landed, or I just come back from, or they knew how stressed I was about the meeting. It's like, sure, but none of that really follows through to you being a jerk.
Yeah, and one of the things that you often come back to is ask for what you want. And I think part of not being a jerk in a relationship is when you're feeling something akin to contempt, there's a need there, isn't there? There's a potential request there in
Yeah,
terms of
cool.
that
Yeah,
thing that you used to do for me that you don't do anymore. You
yeah,
can get all contemptuous and annoyed and sarcastic and jerky about, or you could just more respectfully and politely ask for a
yeah.
small.
No, I agree. It's a really good, it's a good point. I think we say in the article that doesn't mean endlessly being self-sacrificing or never ever
Definitely.
raising your voice. So the relationship, we wrote another piece, didn't we, on relationships not being, not just being safe spaces. It can ask for what you want, but being needy or demanding, that's different again, right? You can also disagree with somebody. You can say, and I'm not sure I agree, I'm not sure that's the best way to spend the weekend, or I think we're packing too much in, or I think kids are overscheduled, or I think we need to get busier with team sports for the kids. They're not doing it, whatever it is, right? You can take issue with it. It's fine, right? There's just think there's a stopping point before you then get contemptuous and do down the other person's family, or why do you never support my desire to get the kids learning the cello or the violin or whatever. I see those arguments play out in a very sometimes unkind, spiteful way. Whereas really, if you can pull it back, the principle of what's being aimed at, there often isn't that much difference between the couple. Like, do we want to see one another's families? Do we think that one another's family are important to each other and good for the kids if kids are involved? Typically, yes. Do you want the children playing team sports? Often people do. Sometimes they might have a slight disagreement about, do we want them to learn a musical instrument or whatever else. It's all a bit twee, aren't they, these examples, effectively? But that kind of thing is often like there is a shared base. It's just, well, yeah, I don't want to be driving through traffic on Saturday morning, or I just want to sometimes get up and have breakfast as a family. And that can be asked for, right? It's be worth identifying that, wouldn't it? Like, that's the thing that I want. What I want is for us to get up and have some time all together before we're ferrying, people off in different directions or going our separate ways.
Good. The only other thought I had on all of this was whether you were kind of carrying this idea that the other stuff doesn't really matter. So when we at the beginning of the podcast, we're talking about attachment styles and personality differences. If we look at the big five and how people connect, it
Yeah.
it does suggest that kind of how you behave in a relationship is more important than who you are, almost who the two of you are. And as I get older and I do this work more, I do think that has a fundamental truth to it, that people of all different kinds can have really, really good relationships with each other. And I think the mistake a lot of people make is thinking that they're looking for a certain type of person rather than someone
Yeah.
who just fundamentally treats you with respect and responds well when you ask them
Yeah.
to change something.
Yeah. So it's an interesting point, isn't it? I don't know whether this perfectly connects up, but the other thing we talk about in the article, which might be worth 30 seconds, is the no arsehole rule at work. So
Yeah.
the Stanford professor, a guy called Robert Sutton, published a book called The No Arsehole Rule. So basically calling for workplaces to to weed out toxic, brilliant but toxic employees. And there's something there, I think, isn't there? It's like how brilliant are you if you're doing that? Like how disruptive is that? And how
Yeah.
I don't
We've
know.
seen quite a few of them during our time, haven't we?
Definitely, it's another podcast.
Yeah.
But I think there is something about the behavior in the relationship, as you say. I think lots of people can get on. You see it with your friends, don't you? Like
Yeah.
my friend's school friend, we got thrown together largely. I've got some other friends too. I might even count you on that list. But the rump of them I made when I was 11 because we lived in the same geographical location and we all landed at the same uh, school. I don't think it's that we're inherently connected or we're identical, our personalities really fit. We've gotten to know one another. We've continued behaving in a way that is, I don't know, that we find fun and is
Yeah.
supportive of one another. And, it's the right balance of,
Yeah.
enjoying one another's companies, a bit of banter and a bit of kindness and care and whatnot. It's more the behaviors really than like
Yeah, exactly. Like if every time you met up with those school friends, that one guy at the table was rolling his eyes every time you told a bad joke or whatever, he wouldn't be part of the group for very long.
absolutely. And then probably if you carried that through, there are some people who've fallen away over the years because they
Yeah.
didn't to keep in touch so much or because they never got their round in or whatever else it
Yeah.
was. That would all be, I think, part of the mix too. So no, I mean, I agree with you. I think the behavior bit is really is super important, and there's something about swapping out one set of problems for another, isn't there? That if you do change partner, you end up choosing a partner is to choose a set of problems and you put one down, you get another one, and it's fun for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years even. But then it's like, oh, they come with problems too. They come with, all of the things that you saw before.
Is the same true of podcast hosts, co-hosts?
Have we said enough?
I think we've said enough. I think we've said enough. Is there anything from the article that you don't think we've covered? I think,
I think that's I
yeah.
think that's
It,
broadly the sweep of it.
we were worried that we wouldn't have much to say because it is quite a simple concept, isn't it? Don't be
Yeah.
a jerk, don't be contemptuous. I think that there is a simplicity to it that people can take away from the conversation, but in reality, I think it's like a lot of what we talk about. It's a disciplined set of behaviors over a long period of time rather than a simple answer, and that's actually
Yeah, agree,
harder than it
agree.
sounds.
Yeah, and it's on you, right? So if someone's behaving that way towards you and you're certain of it, I mean, I'd head to the hills. But if you're thinking something's gone wrong and it used to be lovelier, I would turn inwards. I think that's what therapy is. It's like, okay, what can you do differently? Who's going to go first? And my invitation to couples is both go first. Right, you're both going to need to go first, and it's a competition to see who can behave really, really well. And if the other person can't keep up or won't join you on that, well, you've got your answer, haven't you? I wouldn't stick around. But, if you can set the pace on that and then have someone challenge you back and we're moving further and further towards respect and, fun times and uplifting conversations, well, that's the win.
Good. Always good to talk. We'll see
Yeah,
you.
nice to see you.
All right. Take care. Bye.